The quantitative section of the SSAT is the math section. So the grade 3 and 4 students do one section on the test, and the upper level students do 2 sections. It's multiple choice format. So this is an example of the grade 3 test. And as you can see, this is a word problem type. So the second language learner would have maybe issues figuring out what was the important information. So one thing you can do is ask the students to actually circle or underline the important piece of information, okay? All right, so then I would ask the student to identify what kind of question it is. Well, many grade 3 students don't multiply yet, but this is basically a multiplication problem. Or it could be an adding problem where they would simply just put 300 plus 300 plus 300 plus 300. Okay. Now this is a straight subtraction question. So in order for the student to be successful on that, it looks like they would have to know how to do some carrying and borrowing and things like that. Okay. The students are supplied with scrap paper or to work out their solutions. Grade 4 section. Again, very wordy questions, 30 rows. ESL students would have to know what a row is. 11 seats. Okay, so how many seats? So how many seats are there? Okay, a little less wordy, but students would still need to understand the operations for this type of question. For number 2. Okay, here's a middle level one. Now, this is a fairly straightforward question. The school reports a student-to-teacher ratio of 6:1. If there are 45 teachers in the school, how many students are there? Students may not understand the concept of what a ratio is. So, I mean, this is a simple multiplication type question, but students would need to know what a ratio is. All right. Now this one's an interesting one. As the elevator is on the first floor, it goes up 8 floors, down 5 floors, then up 4 floors. What is the final position? So this one is not strictly a math question. This is more of sort of a logic problem-solving type of question. So with this type of question, I would probably encourage the student to somehow visually represent this one. So in order to be successful in this section, the students need basic math understanding and fluency. In other words, they need to know their facts, let's say, and they need to know their basic math. And they need to do it at a fairly fast rate. Now, the second thing is that if you think about how math is often taught, students usually are taught one type of question and then given many examples of that type of question to practice with. On a test like this, the students are required to choose and use, so meaning that they need to figure out, they've been taught many strategies, but they need to apply the right strategy to the right situation. They need to obviously be able to understand the vocabulary and find the important information in the question. And they need to have the ability to solve multi-step questions. So some students, especially those with certain types of learning issues, have trouble when it comes to multi-step questions. So they can do the first part, but then they forget what the next step is. So here are some teaching strategies that teachers can use. First, I would always encourage students to circle or underline important information. And actually, what I often have the students do is have them decide what the operation is. So I will ask them, is it a times question? Is it a divide? Right? Is it something about fractions? And actually have them write that somewhere. The next thing is for multi-step questions, have the students actually create a set of formula cards so that if they're having trouble with the choosing and using that I mentioned before, they can try to match the formula or example card that they made with the type of question, and even allow the students to use these during some of their practice. Now, there will come a time when you'll want to take these away because obviously the students can't rely on them during the test, but they are good for studying. I would also teach the students how to represent the problems visually. Some students work better with visual learners. Some students do better with verbal approaches, talking them out. Some students do better with kind of hands-on, sort of moving pieces around the table. And those strategies can all be employed. But basically, because the students are going to be using paper and pencil, they need to figure out a way to do it visually and silently. Now, if you do a quick web search for math problem solving strategies, there are many that you can specifically teach students. And so if they don't get a question using one technique, they can use another technique. So one is a guess and check, and this works pretty well. If they're really stuck on an SSAT, they can actually plug in the answers to check whether it's right, because the answers are actually in front of them in the multiple choice section. But you need to point this out, especially to younger students. There are other types of strategies such as making charts, drawing pictures. As I said, any Google search for problem-solving strategies brings some up. The Singapore National Board of Education has a pretty good site on this if you want to check that out. As I said, some students are visual and they really want to talk out their questions. These are often the students who are better at language and not as strong with the symbolic languages or math processes. So I would allow these students to talk to you while they're practicing the different types of questions. And then the last thing I think is really important is that students will be in a panic and they'll be in a hurry to try to finish. So I would actually teach them how to organize their scrap page so they can keep their work neatly organized so that their work is not all over the place. So those are just a few strategies that you can employ when teaching the SSAT quantitative portion.